how do you get rid of everybody else? So, so that's good. So again, so last week we spoke about, I think I'm bleeding here.
You are bleeding.
Cut myself somehow.
You must have got a paper cut.
I don't know what I've done. Anyhow.
No emergencies. I don't have this
No,
material
I
to
don't
cover.
have, I don't think I need stitches. So last week, anyhow, we did chapters 1, 2, and 3, and we looked at sort of the introduction to what is love, some of the challenges in families, where the Lord shows us in the scriptures how about love and about struggles that have always been there right from the time of Adam and Eve. So now, as we told you last week, we're going to skip over chapters 4 and 5. Teresa's going to cover them next week, and they're really a beautiful, beautiful meditation on love, on the Beatitudes, and on what is love. That's one of the questions were asked at the very beginning. How does the Holy Father define love? Well, that's what Teresa will talk to you about next week. So tonight, though, we're going to look at chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. So chapter 6 is some pastoral perspectives. Chapter 7 is the better education of children. Chapter 8 is accompanying, discerning, and integrating weakness. And then finally, the spirituality of marriage and family. So you may remember when this document came out a few years ago now, there was a bit of a controversy around the document. And that was in chapter 8. And so hopefully we'll be able to spend a little bit of time on that. It's one paragraph. The whole book's controversy is one paragraph. And actually, it's one footnote in one paragraph. That was the whole controversy, is one footnote. So we'll look at that when we get to chapter 8, and I'll explain a little bit about what was the controversy and why is it a problem, and what should we do about it. Well, I'll try anyhow to do that. But before we get there, let's start back again, chapter 6. So this is the, again, pastoral perspective. So how do we deal with all of this? These struggles, these difficulties, these problems, these blessings. How do we deal with all of this? And so first we have to realize that different communities are going to need different responses, right? I think we said that right at the very beginning too. The Holy Father made clear that there's no one answer for everybody. We have one belief, one Lord, one baptism, one church, one faith. But how we live and apply that faith will be different in the cultures, the communities, the families in which we find ourselves. And that's one of the big things we're going to be hearing all night tonight, is that we have to look at each family uniquely and see how do we apply, how do we put into practice this amazing, amazing teaching that we have on marriage and family life. How do we apply it? So we start off this chapter 6 by, the subtitle is Proclaiming the Gospel of the Family Today. Proclaiming the Gospel of the Family Today. And Christian families are called by their very nature, by the sacrament of marriage, are the principal agents of showing this joy-filled life of family. You know, if we have miserable families, and I don't mean bad families, sad and grumpy, and we're not proclaiming the joy of family life. You know, if we're always talking about family is so hard and it's so difficult, and my husband does this and my wife does that, and the kids are horrible at that, there's not much joy in there, right? I think I told you this last week, but it's important to remember this. Beautiful little saying one of our priests at the seminary used to say, if your faith makes you sad and not glad, that's bad. Our faith should make us glad, and our families should make us glad. We are to proclaim, our families are to proclaim the joy-filled witness of family life, and that they're called to sow the seed. That's all any of us are called to do, to sow the seed. The watering, the growing, that's all God's work. Our job is simply to sow the seed, to let others see that family life can be happy and can be fulfilling, and that we, by our family lives, can evangelize, can show others the happiness and joy that comes from family life. This calls, though, for more than just a theoretical approach. So the Holy Father several times in the document says it's not enough just to proclaim dogmas. We believe what we believe, and that's the cause of our joy. But we have to be able to take those teachings and apply them in people's real lives. He says pastoral care for families needs to make it clear that the gospel of the family responds to the deepest expectations of the human person, a response to each one's dignity and fulfillment in reciprocity, communion, and fruitfulness. That our teachings have to have real life application. It's not enough just to say, this is what we teach. We have to apply it in our lives. And he gives then some examples of a few ways that we have, things we have to get better at to do that. And the very first one he talks about is seminary training. And he says, you know, sometimes our priests are not very equipped to deal with family problems. Amazing. How is that possible? A priest isn't equipped. But he says sometimes they're not. And he says we need a more adequate formation of priests, deacons, men and women religious, catechists, and other pastoral workers. It has become clear that ordained ministers often lack the training needed to deal with the complex problems currently facing families. And that's true, because we train our priests, and rightly so, and probably the only way so, as sort of general practitioners. We get a little smattering of this, a little smattering of that, and a little smattering of the other thing. And it's only after ordination, by practicing, by dealing with things, by maybe some further studies, that one becomes better and better at it. But our priests, there's so much to learn. You know, if you go to seminary, if someone you know, a grandson or son was to go to seminary right out of high school, no other college or university studies, it's 9 years now to become a priest. 9 years. And it's really not long enough. There's so much more that we would love to be able to teach them. But we do need to get better at this, the Holy Father says. He says they should receive a more extensive interdisciplinary and not merely doctrinal formation in the areas of engagement in marriage. You know, I went to the seminary. We had a course called Marriage and Sexuality, and I think they still have that course. That was our one and only one semester, 13 weeks, 3 hours a week, so 39 hours on marriage and sexuality. That was our training. And we had one course on pastoral counseling. That was our training. And we need to, the Holy Father says, not just doctrinal teaching. We can teach the doctrine of what we believe about marriage and sexuality. But again, how do we help apply that? How do we help our young seminarians learn how to apply that into the lives of those they're called to serve? Because thanks be to God, people still do come to the church looking for answers when they have a problem. And we need to...
Sorry. Oh, I thought you were finished. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
We have a question that just kind of relates to this area, so I thought I'd jump in there with it.
Sure.
And
Good.
they're asking, you know, is it maybe that we should look at deacons doing this piece? Would this be a better, avenue for the deacons? And I think you'd probably have some response to that. So
yeah. That is a good possibility, because the deacons are married people themselves who have their own children and such. But just because someone's married and has children doesn't make them an expert on marriage and children, right? what was the guy's name? Was it Dr. Spock, who was supposed to be the expert on family? He wasn't married, I don't think.
That's right. They found out, yes.
Right? And so he's the guy who gave everyone all the expert, and he wasn't married. They had no children himself. So deacons could be an option. Again, they would need more training than they get, because deacons training is even less than seminary. It's one weekend a month for 4 years is what a deacon is trained. And so, yes, that's a possibility, but it would still require that we need to have some in each area, some priests, some deacons, who maybe have some further studies in this, so that we have experts. We have experts in canon law, we have experts in dogma, we have experts in moral teaching of the church. Maybe we need to get some experts in marriage and family life as well. I don't know if we've ever sent a priest away to study marriage and family life. Maybe that's what we need to do, to have that clergy presence available to assist our families who are coming with need. But it is a possibility for deacons. But I don't think just because one is a deacon automatically gives them a better ability than the priest would have.
And I just want to add, because we don't have deacons in every parish, that's a challenge. You never know. So you'd have to train your priests. And I think priests want to help their people in every capacity. So as you say, they want to have a good, solid foundation. And the last thing I just want to add in there, just to verify what you said, is in my work, I spend tons of time on webinars and going to conferences to learn the research, because the research tells us stuff and we sometimes don't think about that. So it's as you say, it's an ongoing situation.
Right. The Holy Father, after speaking about training our seminarians better, also says that we need training in lay leaders who can assist in the pastoral care of families. Like that we have people in parishes who have some training, who are not clergy, but can help families who are in trouble when they have need, so that there needs to be more training. You may have heard very recently, with this past year, the Holy Father has instituted a new ministry called catechist. We haven't fully decided in Canada yet what that means, because there are two different ways of looking at this word catechist. And it would be an installed ministry. One would be formally installed as a catechist. And one of the ways of looking at being catechist, and the one I prefer, is the catechist is what we would today call a lay pastoral minister. They assist with the running of the whole parish. They're not just ones who teach catechism, but that they are involved in the running of the whole parish, and that part of their work, if we had catechists in every parish, they could be the laity that would be trained to assist other families in their struggles. So that's another thing we need to do better. The Holy Father said, not just training our seminarians priests, but also training more lay people to assist in this task of helping families in their need. Holy Father next goes on to talk about how we need to prepare couples for marriage. That is a very important element, he says. We need to help our young people discover the dignity and beauty of marriage. When I think about what I did with couples for marriage preparation, and I read this, I wondered, did I do that? I think I tried a little bit, but maybe I should have done more to help couples discover the dignity and beauty of marriage. Because a lot of our young people, and you know better than I do, that's not how they look at marriage, as this beautiful, beautiful way of life they're entering into. When you talk about the sacrament of marriage, that it's a vocation, it's the way they prepare for heaven, it's like they're like deers in the headlights, what do you mean? We just want to get married. And they don't make it too long. Don't make this preparation stuff too long. Don't make it boring. We just want to get married. But we need to help them understand the dignity of that. And the Holy Father goes on to say in that the need to involve the entire community more extensively by stressing the witnesses of family themselves and by grounding marriage preparation in the process of a Christian initiation, bringing out the connection between marriage, baptism, and other sacraments. But marriage just doesn't stand on its own. I just want to get married. Marriage is the living out of our baptism, our confirmation, that it's understanding those sacraments and what they mean in our lives that will help us to better understand what marriage is all about. I think, we try to do this in the diocese. Teresa and her office are responsible for the marriage preparation course that we have in our diocese. And I know it's not just about, how to make a financial ledger and how to plan for the future. And, I like green ice cream and you like blue ice cream. There's some of that involved, of course, there has to be. But there also has to be this idea of realizing marriage is the next step in their journey of faith. And that if we don't understand baptism and confirmation in those first steps, we're not going to understand the next step very well either. And the Holy Father says there's lots of ways to structure these programs, and each individual church has to find the way that works best for them. It's not going to be the same worldwide because, again, different cultures, different ways, different peoples, and we need to find what will work for us. But that it's important to involve couples in marriage preparation. And it shouldn't just be done by the priest or by Dr. Spock. That we need to involve couples who, he says, show with great courage and generosity their marriage, that they witness to that. He says marriage preparation should be a kind of initiation into the sacrament of matrimony, initiation into the sacrament, providing couples with the help they need to receive the sacrament worthily and make a solid beginning to the life of the family. That's what marriage prep ultimately has to do. There are things we have to teach them. It's helpful to know how to do a budget, and it's helpful to know whether we're going to be buying pink wallpaper or blue wallpaper, right? But it's more important that they understand what it means to be in the sacrament of marriage if we're going to make marriage and family life last.
Bishop, we have a question that asks, do you think that the 6-month requirement is long enough?
Now that I'm not a pastor, I say no, I don't think it is. If marriage preparation is meant to be an initiation, it's not really long enough. If we're really going to do what marriage preparation is all about, help them to grow in their faith, help them to grow in their fulfillment of baptism and confirmation, to understand what this life is all about. If you're going to meet them every week or every couple of weeks, then maybe you can do it in 6 months. But it seems very squished if marriage is really going to be about an initiation. If it's just about getting the paperwork done and filling in the details and deciding what readings they're going to have at the wedding, we can do that in 6 weeks. But if it's about preparing for a life, what else do we do to prepare for a life in 6 months? You don't go to school just for 6 months for a career, but we do our life, our family life in 6 months. Not sure it's a long enough time. Now that's just my opinion, but I'm not sure it's a long enough time. If we're really going to try to do what this is asking us to do, I don't think we can do it in 6 months. Interesting line in this section. Learning to love someone does not happen automatically. Who thought, eh? We just love each other. Oh yes, we just love each other. That's all that matters. But what is love? What type of love, right? What does it really mean to love? That's what we'll talk about next week. Learning to love someone does not happen automatically, nor can it be taught in a workshop just prior to the celebration of marriage. For every couple, marriage preparation begins at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage preparation begins at birth. We live that life preparing ourselves for the next journey, for the next step of the journey. And it's a lifetime journey. It's interesting, the Holy Father says, we're not making good enough use of some of our opportunities to show this. And he gives the example of Valentine's Day. And he says how the secular world has really made great use of Valentine's Day. Well, what do we do as a church? We don't even celebrate St. Valentine. He's not in the calendar anymore. But do we use it as a chance to speak about the real meaning of love? Or do we just sort of, we've lost that when we give it over to the secular world? You know, we make sure all our children have a Valentine to give to every one of their classmates, but do we talk to them about what love really means? Making use of the opportunities that are there.
Bishop, it's interesting because someone has put a question in the chat asking, they're getting married in the fall of 223, and when should they take marriage prep? And I loved your line that it starts at birth, because they're already taking marriage prep.
Already taking marriage prep.
Yes, but I have my thoughts on that question, but I'll let you answer that.
So when I did marriage prep with couples, when I prepare couples for marriage, I had a 10-step program to get ready for marriage. 10 things they had to do. Step one was the initial meeting, checking to make sure everything's all right, starting the paperwork, picking the date. That was step one. Step two, we talked about last time, was prepare and enrich. To do prepare and enrich. And step 3 and 4 was to take it up. Step 5 was to do marriage prep. So this was, I always encourage this to be done early on. Like as soon as we finished step 1, we got them enrolled to do prepare and enrich. And as soon as it came back about 2 or 3 weeks later, we had them in to take it up and take it up. And so if you're getting married in summer of 2023, you should be taking marriage prep now so that you have a year to put what you learn into practice. So that's my thoughts. Teresa, do you have a different thought?
No, I don't have a different thought. I think that we plan the program so that we do some of the work in the book that's received, and we hope the couples will continue, as you said, to work through, to learn more about each other, to think about the seriousness of it. So I think it's a great answer.
Thank you. Now, it goes on here to talk about this marriage prep, but marriage prep should also help couples to recognize eventual problems and risks. Because again, I think we mentioned last time, most couples don't think they're going to have any problems. Our life is going to be perfect. So long as we continue to love each other, everything will be perfect in my life. But we need to be prepared, because if we're not prepared, not that we want to be a downer or a pessimist or anything, but if we're not prepared, when stuff comes, it has a bigger effect than if we're ready for it. If we know there's a chance that someone's going to lose their job or someone's going to fall out of a tree and break their leg, it's not as big as to do as if we didn't think this would ever happen to us. And so couples, engaged couples, should be encouraged to understand that their love and commitment is what will get them through the problems of life, not keep the problems of life from coming. Struggles come, and we need to be ready for that to occur. And they need to learn to recognize the danger signals in their relationship. What is a possible danger, and what are the signs that that danger is on the horizon, so that before the wedding, it says, before the wedding, they find effective ways of responding to them. Like what is our issue? I don't know. Someone's very particular about the way the living room furniture is set up. And you know that if the other one likes to change the furniture regularly, how are we going to deal with that? You should know that before you get married. Otherwise, someone's at work and they come home and rearrange the living room and the wedding is off. But if we know that beforehand, because we've talked to each other, we've learned what our struggles are, then we can deal with it much better. Pastoral care of engaged and married couples should be centered on the marriage bond, assisting couples not only to deepen their love, but also to overcome problems and difficulties. It's the bond that gets you through. It's that choosing every morning, somewhere in here, the Holy Father says, choosing every morning to say, I will love this person no matter what comes today. It's that bond that gets you through. And he says it's also important to remind them about the availability of the sacrament of reconciliation, which allows them to bring their sins and past mistakes and their relationship itself before God. You know, love requires a lot of forgiveness, as you who love know. We all have to forgive when we love. And reconciliation is a great, great way to teach us how to forgive, but also how to receive forgiveness and to bring the struggles of our relationship to the Lord. So now we've prepared the engaged couple, we now have to talk about preparing for the celebration itself. And we have to remember, though, a wedding is only 30 minutes to an hour. A marriage is for a lifetime. And so more preparation needs to go into the marriage than goes into the wedding. I used to tell couples, I can help prepare your wedding in 10 minutes. All we need really to prepare the wedding is 10 minutes. You may need longer for the dress and the guests and all that stuff, but to actually prepare for the wedding, all you need to do is tell me what readings you want and what day we're going to be there, and we're done. And we'll have a wedding. We're going to spend most of our time talking about what happens when you leave the church and begin a marriage. That's where we need to really focus on. Book says short-term preparations for marriage tend to be concentrated on invitations, clothes, the party, and any number of other details that tend to drain not only the budget, but the energy and joy as well. How many people get a whole bunch of joy, maybe being sexist, especially the men, about sitting down, looking at what wedding invitation are we going to have? Are we going to have raised letters or not raised letters? Who cares? Just send everyone an email and tell them the wedding is on this day. Right? So our focus needs to be on the wedding. The spouses come to the wedding ceremony exhausted and harried, rather than focused and ready for the great step they're about to take. Amazing. So the Pope has some words directly to engaged couples. He says this: have the courage to be different. Don't let yourselves get swallowed up by a society of consumption and empty appearances. What is important is the love you share, strengthened and sanctified by grace. Those are the Holy Father's words to engaged couples. And maybe we should make that on a little card that we give to everyone who goes to marriage prep, Teresa. These are the Holy Father's words to you. And this is what he's saying we need to do.
And Bishop, I'm just going to interject because I said earlier about my daughter getting married during COVID. My daughter told me it was the best wedding she was ever at, not because it was her own, but because the whole thing was about the ceremony between the two of them, their vows, and not anything else. There was nothing else to do. So it was, the Holy Father is definitely onto the right course there.
There you are. That's a great segue into, because he goes on to say, in their preparation for marriage, the couple should be encouraged to make a liturgical celebration a profound personal experience and to experience the meaning of each of its signs. To make that marriage ceremony a profound moment, and not, I don't want to be mean, but for many, it's something we have to get through to get to the real part of the wedding, which is the reception. Right? We got to get through the church stuff. But to make that so important. And then he has a beautiful section on the vows, on what the vows mean. It's the vow that makes marriage. I would ask my couples in part of their preparation, what makes marriage occur? Most of them, not all, but most would say what makes marriage is the exchange of rings. That's what makes marriage happen. No, it's the vows. I take you to be my husband and I take you to be my wife. That's what makes marriage. Without those words, there is no marriage. It's that giving of oneself, that free giving of oneself to another. These words of consent that are given freely. And these words do not take away one's freedom. They give one freedom. I am free to give myself to this person. Freedom and fidelity, the vows are not opposed. The words freedom and fidelity are not opposed to each other. It's not that I'm stuck with this one person, I can't be with all these others. No, it's I'm freely giving myself to this one. That's the true freedom of marriage. They need to be encouraged to see the sacrament not as a single moment that then becomes part of the past and its memories, but rather as a reality that permanently influences the whole of married life. You know, as Catholics, we're always doing one of three things. We are either preparing for, celebrating, or living out a sacrament. That's what we're doing all the time. Preparing for, celebrating, or living out a sacrament. So couples prepare for marriage, they celebrate marriage, and then they spend the rest of their life living out marriage. The marriage was not 1 hour 40 years ago. The wedding was 1 hour 40 years ago. But the marriage is every single second of every single day for the rest of your lives together. And that's what needs to be prepared for. Again, conscious of time and wanting to leave time for the last part, I'm going to speed up my pace a little bit. Prayer, just when I'm going to speed up, talk about prayer. Couples need to learn to pray with each other, and it doesn't need to be 2 hours of holding hands and going in each other's eyes. You know, say the Our Father at bedtime with each other, or say grace before meals together. Just some way that God is part of their lives. And the family needs to be part of community. When I was a young man, I don't know how many of you know, I played the organ. That's how I paid my way through seminary, was playing the organ. And I used to play at a church that was out in the country, in a village just outside of Kitchener-Waterloo called St. Clement's. And when I did weddings, there was always people from the community who came to the wedding. Now, maybe they came as busybodies, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to see the dress, I don't know. But people from the community came to the wedding. They weren't invited. It's just there was this wedding in our community and we wanted to be part of that. So same with funerals. There was a funeral in our parish, we just came. Like that couple was not just an individual entity. They were part of this larger community, and the community shared in their day, and the family needs to share in the life of the community as well. Holy Father then has a long section on working with couples in their first 5 years of marriage. That, again, marriage just doesn't boom, magically happen because I said I do, and you said you do. We now have everything figured out. We need to be supported and encouraged. We do this with young priests. We have retreats for our newly ordained priests every 3 years or so, where all the newly ordained from Ontario are invited to come for a retreat to encourage them in the first 7 years of their priestly life. And the Holy Father says we should be doing this with our couples as well. He also has a strong section on not being too critical of each other. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. No husband is the perfect husband, and no wife is the perfect wife. No one's perfect. But if we are persistently critical, then we're not really focused on the purpose of marriage. We're focused on the fact that I'm not getting what I want. And so to really be conscious of not being too critical. Couples need to mature in their love for each other. They need to grow in that love. And children, when children come along, they make a big change in that. But again, as we talked about the last time, seeing children as a gift. Children are a gift to marriage, not a not a burden, but as a gift from God. But he does talk about parents have to use their own conscience to determine the number of children they have so that they can care for their children properly. It has to be a conscience, and maybe some point we need to have a lecture series on what conscience means. It's not just what I think is best, what I think is right, what I feel is what the way it should be, what everybody else says. It's what I really believe is the truth that God is revealing to me. That's conscience. This is what my God and my church teach me, and I use that to help decide what is right in my life. And so we need to follow that. Again, just as life goes on, believe it or not, and I'm sure none of you have experienced this in your marriages, but as life goes on, sometimes the warm, fuzzy love of wedding day fades away. Believe it or not, I think some people it does. You don't get the warm fuzzy anymore, just being in each other's presence. But it doesn't mean love has stopped. Love has grown into a new type of love, into a stronger type of love, not just based on emotion. Emotions come and go. If love is on emotion, it's going to go away because emotions change all the time. So we grow into something deeper. So Holy Father says the novelty, when the novelty of marriage wears off, there needs to be something to help couples find that strength in each other. And to find that strength in the routine that gives them a healthy sense of closeness through this shared daily rituals that, oh, life is boring. We get up, we go to work, we come home, we watch TV, we go to bed. It's boring. But to find love in each other in those daily rituals. And part of that has to do with faith, that we make sure as a couple we're bringing faith in. Then the Holy Father has a section on, well, what happens if one of the couples doesn't have faith? What do we do then? And there's a beautiful section on that. And the basic point is that even though one may not have faith, we still have common values, right? We still have common values of right and wrong, good and bad. We may have different reasons that we have those values, but we have common values, and that's what we build upon. So those common values, those common outlooks on life, even though we may have a different outlook from a different perspective than the other. And Holy Father again says the parish needs to be able to help couples in this, make referrals if necessary, to support couples when they come in need. And for couples who strayed away from the church, the Holy Father talks about when they come back, do we encourage them to come back? Do we encourage them when they come to have their child baptized, or do we shame them? Where have you been for the past 6 months? We haven't seen you since you got married. When they come for First Communion and confirmation, do we encourage them or do we shame them? Do we make it clear we want them there and that marriage is a dignity and we're so happy that they have come? Again, we always have to proclaim the truth. But do we proclaim the truth in a condemning way or do we proclaim the truth in an inviting way? There are changes that come in life, families and growing old and all these sorts of things, empty nesters. But the challenges, and then there are individual challenges that come, relationship problems, financial problems, so on and so on. It's what we do with those problems that really makes marriage strong. How do children learn to walk? They learn to walk by falling down and going boom. And they get back up and they walk again. And you learn that 2 + 2 is 4. When on your first math test, you put 2 + 2 is 5. You get it wrong and you learn, no, 2 + 2 is 4. It's going through the struggles, going through the crises together that strengthens the relationship. Crises and struggles don't mean relationships are over. They're obstacles that you are to be overcome together as a couple. And sadly though, some couples are not always open to facing these crises together. And sometimes the church has not been open to helping couples face these crises together. And so it creates struggles. But ultimately, we need to find that forgiveness and find that strength in each other so that we don't, opting out is not our first option. That seems to be our first option. The solution, the Holy Father says, they realize after all that every crisis can be a new yes, enabling love to be renewed, deepened, and inwardly strengthened. Every crisis is an opportunity for a new yes. Yes to this relationship, yes to this person, yes to this family, yes to my faith, yes to God. They're all struggles. There's lots of stuff that keeps us, but we need to overcome them together. Holy Father's section on separation and divorce and how to accompany them. Again, conscious of time, I'm going to skip over that. The church, while appreciating the situations of conflict that are part of marriage, cannot fail to speak out on behalf of those who are most vulnerable, the children. That we have to really, in struggles and crises in families, make sure children are taken care of and protected. And he says, for this reason, Christian communities must not abandon divorced parents who have entered a new union, but should include and support them in their efforts to bring up their children in the faith. So just because someone's divorced and remarried, we can't throw them out and throw out the children who are there with them. He says, divorce is an evil, and the increasing number of divorces is very troubling. Hence, our most important pastoral task with regards to family is to strengthen their love, helping to heal the wounds and working to prevent the spread of this drama of our times. So instead of being reactive, we need to be proactive in making families stronger so that we don't have as many divorces. Right? Rather than how do we deal with divorce, that's how do we make families strong so divorce doesn't occur as often. Here's a section on mixed marriage. Mixed marriage is when we have a Catholic and a non-Catholic, baptized non-Catholic. So Catholic marries an Anglican, a Lutheran, a Presbyterian, whatever. How do we deal with that? Section when a Catholic marries non-baptized person. So they marry a Jewish person, a Hindu person, a Muslim person. How do we deal with that? How do they deal with marrying a non-believer? How do we deal with that? And what about when someone has been married outside the church and now the non-believing partner starts to believe and wants to be baptized? How do we deal with that situation? Again, it's all being kind. We have to hold on to what we believe, but to present it, what are our options? Not just, this is the rule. What are the options that we can go forward with? Single parent families, same couple families, when death occurs in a family, in this section, the Holy Father has a beautiful, several pages meditation on when death comes to a family. And that struggle of faith and marriage when death occurs. And he says a beautiful thing, this does not mean imagining our loved ones as they were, but being able to accept them changed as they now are. Not just holding on to what was, but what is. How do we live in this new reality of love and marriage? Let's not waste energy by dwelling on the distant past. The better we live on this earth, the greater the happiness we will be able to share with our loved ones in heaven. The more you love in your family, the more you will be loved and able to love in the kingdom of God. So again, very conscious of time. That was chapter 6. 7, I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time on because I want to deal with chapter 8. It's the difficult one. But chapter 7 is the education of children. how to better educate our children. And he starts off by saying we need, as parents, we need to be very conscious of what our children are exposed to. Who is entering their rooms? Who is providing their entertainment? With whom are they spending their free time? We need to be conscious of these things, and that vigilance is necessary. Not obsession. He says we need not to be obsession. We need to help our young people to learn good and bad, and let them build from that. But we need to teach them that good and bad. We're not to be helicopter parents, but rather parents who set a good foundation on which their children can grow. Because you can't be with them every second of every day. You just can't. Nor should you be. But we have to set that strong foundation. We rely on the schools to help us with their basic education, but ultimately the moral formation of children can never be fully given over to another. It's the role of the parents to teach children right and wrong. Parents are responsible for shaping the will of their children, fostering good habits and a natural inclination to goodness. He talks about correction as incentive, not as punishment. And he says we must never, ever lose our temper with children when we are correcting them. Because as soon as they think they are of no value, or they're not wanted, or that you stop loving them, it's not going to work anymore. We always they have to learn there are consequences, especially adolescents need to learn that there are consequences for misbehavior. But we need to do it in such a way that it is helpful to the child, and not just constantly telling them, you've done this wrong, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, you're bad at that, you're no good at this. That's not helpful to children at all.
Bishop Lobsinger, someone has asked, does your comment include what our kids are exposed to at school?
Well, I think we need to be aware of that for sure. We need to be aware of what our children are exposed to at everything. You know, I think a good thing now is that most kids come home, especially elementary kids, come home with their daily binder that tells what happened at school today, and that communication with the teacher. You should have good communication with your children's teacher. What's going on? The religion program for most of our schools in our diocese, you can get online. You as parents can get online. Your schools should be providing you with the online resource. You can know what they're teaching each day in religion class anyhow. I don't know if all of our school boards have, but most of our school boards have bought that online component that our parents can do that. Yeah, especially in terms of faith and morals, you can never fully give over the education of faith and morals to another, including the school. School is here to help you. The parish is here to help you. The church is here to help you. But as parents, you are ultimately the first teachers of your children in faith and morals. The family is the first school of human values, where we learn to use wisely our freedom. Very important. Family is the primary setting for socialization. Families is where we learn all our first most important lessons. But parents must not become domineering. The scriptures at one point say, fathers, do not cause your children to hate you. We can't be dominant. Children are not our property that we get to control at our whim. They are gifts to us from God. There's a big section on the need for sex education, but proper and good sex education. A positive, the Second Vatican Council, this isn't, he's quoting the Second Vatican Council, this is from 1960. Spoke of a positive and prudent sex education to be imparted to children and adolescents as they grow older, and with due weight being given to the advanced in psychological, pedagogical, and didactic sciences. Sexual education that fosters a healthy sense of modesty has immense value. However much some people nowadays consider modesty a relic of bygone eras. The important thing is to teach them sensitivity to different expressions of love, mutual concern and care, loving, respect, and deeply meaningful communication. All of these prepare for an integral and generous self-love. So that's what sex education is supposed to be. He says, what we often get in sex education is a sex education deals primarily with protection through the practice of safe sex. Such expressions convey a negative attitude toward the natural procreative finality of sexuality. So usually sex education is about how not to get pregnant. That's what most sex education seems to be. Whereas it's meant to be about the dignity of who we are, the dignity of who others are, modesty, how I respect myself, how I respect others. This should be the main part of sex education. We need to teach them the things they need to know to stay safe and healthy, of course. But we also need to teach them that this is, most people don't think this is true, but as Catholics, we believe sex is a good thing. We believe it's a beautiful and good and gift from God. We need to understand it that way, though. Right now, our society thinks that sex is just some sort of biological thing that has no more consequence than eating a popsicle because I'm hot. So I get hot and bothered, so I go have sex and I'm not bothered anymore. That's not how we view sex. It's a beautiful gift from the Lord. And we need to learn to appreciate the differences within ourselves and appreciate others and not just see it as some sort of negative thing.
Bishop, might I just jump in here because we had that question that someone had sent prior to this evening asking what are the Catholic Church's best resources that will help parents teach their children sex education. A couple of things I'm just going to say briefly because we don't have too much time to talk about it, but if anybody's looking for resources, feel free again to email me and I can provide you with some. What we teach in the Fully Alive program and then the Family Life program in high school is actually very solid material looked at by theologians, looked at by the bishops. A lot of people don't really know what's in the program, how it builds, but again, you can look at that online. So that's a good place to look. And I'm just going to finish by saying, because again, we could do a whole talk on just this, that Bishop Lobsinger said earlier that marriage preparation begins at birth, so does sex education. From the moment our children are born, how we talk about it, how we talk about each other, how we talk about people we see on a screen, how we talk about respecting ourselves and our bodies and what we mean. So it's not a talk or a little talk when they get to be adolescents. It's a talk from birth right through, and that's the best education. I think most people know what to say, they just don't often say it.
Very true. Thanks, Teresa. Okay, chapter 8. This is the contentious chapter of the book. We have a beautiful, beautiful teaching on family life and marriage. We do. I hope you've been hearing how full and beautiful our teaching is. But the reality is that we also have many, many people of our faith who are in relationships that are less than ideal, that don't quite measure up to that perfect ideal that we have been talking about. And although we have to constantly hold up the perfection, we also have to learn to help those who are in less than perfect ideals. And so how do we do that? How do we do that? I remember a dear priest who was very important to me when I was in the seminary. He once told me an old adage that as a priest, you have to be a lion in the pulpit and a lamb in the confessional. And we have to proclaim the truth. But then when we're dealing with individuals, we have to be gentle in applying that truth and not apply the truth with a sledgehammer. This is what we believe. This is what we teach. And if you don't measure up, you're out. The Holy Father very clearly says in here that couples who are married outside the church, who are divorced and remarried, who are in irregular situations, who are living together without marriage, they are not excommunicated. They are not kicked out of the church. They are still members of our church, members of our family. And we have to find ways to help them come into the family more, enter into the family in a deeper way, not just so they fulfill the law, but so they can receive all the blessings that living in the sacrament of marriage allows them to receive. We have all these gifts to give them, and we want them to be able to receive as many of them as we possibly can. And so he talks about, and he takes this term from Pope St. John Paul II, what he calls the gradualness in pastoral care. Gradualness in pastoral care. That the basic gist, the very basic gist of chapter 8 is you start where people are at, and you, with love and with mercy and with compassion, we help to move them one step forward. That's the basic gist of chapter 8. That wherever they're at, whether they are in a second marriage outside the church, whether they are divorced and remarried, whether they are single parent families, they are cohabitating, whatever. We start where they are. We find the good that is there, because there's always some good. We talked about that last week. In every relationship where there is love, where there is stability, there is good. We start with the good that is there, and then we try to slowly bring them forward. He says the choice of a civil marriage or cohabitation often is not done as a rejection of the church or rejection of faith, but is done because that's what society does at this particular time. Right? Most people get married outside the church, don't do it because, oh, I don't like the church, I don't agree with the church, I'm against the church. It's because that's what people do. People live together today in our culture. They don't always get married. And it's not a rejection, but often it's because of the culture. And so, as I said, St. John Paul II proposed this law of gradualness. And it doesn't mean that we don't apply, that the law doesn't apply to them. That's not what it means. It means, well, we accept less than perfect, and it's okay. Again, in here somewhere he says it's not that the law can be applied to everyone in every circumstance the same way, but it's not because someone has a special circumstance that the law has to change. Right? The law and the teaching of the church are good and holy, and we want to bring people along into that. They may not be there yet, but we want to bring them along into that. And so we have to do it gradually, in stages, one step at a time. So we have a section on discerning what we call in the church irregular situations. An irregular situation is when we have a Catholic who is living with someone who they're not married to in the Catholic Church. Whether they got married at City Hall, they got married at a Protestant church without permission, they're just living together. These are irregular situations. The law of the church is every Catholic is obliged to be married in front of a Catholic priest or deacon or have permission otherwise for the marriage to be accepted by the church. That's the church's teaching. You must be married by a Catholic priest or Catholic deacon with 2 witnesses for the marriage to be valid, as the church considers marriage valid. But all these irregular situations, that has not occurred, either because they've chosen not to get married in the church, they've gotten married, they've gone away for a destination marriage, they've been divorced, and so they can't get married in the church. until an annulment, if annulment is possible or not. These would all be irregular situations in the church. But again, they're not excommunicated. They're still members of the church. We want to help to make them fuller members of the church. If we can take away their irregularity, we want to. But we can't do it by forcing Metamucil down their throat to deal with their irregularity. We have to do it in a gentle way so that they feel they're wanted and that they belong, because they do. And we do. We want them. But today it doesn't work just to pound the law. We know that doesn't work today. And so we have to find other ways to invite them in without denying what we believe, right? And just because someone's in a regular situation doesn't mean the law has to change to suit them. We bring them along one step at a time.
Bishop, someone's asked a question if someone in an irregular marriage can receive communion, a Catholic in an irregular marriage.
Hold on to that thought. That's the contentious part of this document. So hold on, we're getting there. Holy Father says, naturally, if someone flaunts an objective sin as if it were part of the Christian ideal or wants to impose something other than what the church teaches, he or she can in no way presume to teach or preach to others. So you can't say that, I'm not living as the church lives and I'm right and the church is wrong. You can say I'm not living as the church asked me to live, but again, it doesn't make you right. We believe our teaching is good and holy and we need to help them try to understand, well, why do we teach what we teach? Not just you're married outside the church, get out. Why is that a bad thing? Why is it bad to not be married in the church? Why would we encourage our young people to get married in the church? You have to go and deal with that boring old priest who really is difficult to talk to. And then you have to go to all these classes and listen to this woman Hartnett blabble on for a few days about marriage is this and marriage is that, and rah, rah, rah. We just want to get married. Why would we encourage them to go to the church to be married? What are they missing by not going to the church? Right? And not just it's the law. It is the law. But there are other more wonderful, beautiful reasons to get married in the church other than it's just of the law. And so when people are in situations that are less than perfect or less than ideal, we need to help them to understand why. Why is this an issue for us? Why is this a concern for us? And how can we help them to move forward? And so we need to adequately discern and distinguish our approaches to that, because we're going to deal with different people different ways. Like, I don't know, the husband and wife, and they have 3 children, and the husband just up and leaves one day, up and gone. I want to be married. I want to do this anymore. Gone, finished, done. Here you have this woman who has 3 children, who's been trying to live a good, faithful life, and we're going to just throw her out of the church. Can't do that. She's done nothing wrong. And so we have to discern with each individual person, what is the situation there, and how do we arrive at the best situation to help them and to move them forward. And we can't set answers for every situation. That's why we need wise pastors who can look at each situation and help that person to move along in that situation. The conversation with the priest in the internal forum contributes to the formation of a correct judgment on what hinders the possibility of fuller participation in the life of the church and what steps can foster it and make it grow. Given that gradualness is not in the law itself, this discernment can never prescind from the gospel demands of truth and charity as proposed by the church. Again, so we can't take away the law, the official teaching of the church. But how do we bring someone into the teaching of the church as far as possible, and then maybe even one step more? That's what we want to learn to do. So there's a big section on mitigating factors to pastoral discernment, what we can do to try to understand each situation a little better. The Catechism states a number of things that the church accepts that can keep us from being culpable for our actions. So, well, first the Holy Father says, hence it can no longer simply be said that all those in any irregular situation are living in a state of mortal sin and are deprived of sanctifying grace. Just because you're in an irregular situation, you cannot automatically imply this person's in a state of mortal sin. They may be, but they may not be, depending on the circumstance. Because our culpability, how guilty we are for an act, has to be determined. The act may be wrong, the act may be sinful objectively, but how guilty one is for that act has to be determined. And that's true in any sin, not just sins in marriage and sexuality. In any sin, our culpability can be removed. For example, if you steal food because you're starving and your family is starving, you've tried every other way to get food. You've gone to the food agencies, you've begged, you've asked, and you can't get any food. And you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family. It's still stealing, but you're not guilty of sin because everyone is entitled to the necessities of life. And so that's not a sin. You would not have to confess stealing because you're entitled to food to live on. And so the Holy Father is applying that same thing here. That sometimes people may be in irregular situations, but because of factors, they may not be. These are some of the factors that can be diminished or even nullified by ignorance, inadvertence, duress, fear, habit, inordinate attachments, other psychological or social factors, affected immaturity, force of acquired habits, conditions of anxiety, other psychological or social factors that lessen or even extenuate moral culpability. So there are many, many things that can take away our culpability. So we can't just say, if you're in an irregular situation, you're in a state of mortal sin. It's something we need to discern and determine to help someone along. So let's get to the big point, the contentious issue. So if you have the book, it's paragraph 305. This is the contentious point of the whole document. So it begins by saying the pastor cannot feel that it is enough simply to apply moral laws to those living in irregular situations. That's what we've just been talking about. It goes on to say, because of forms of conditioning and mitigating factors, it is possible that an objective situation of sin, which may not be subjectively culpable or fully such, a person can be living in God's grace, can love, and can also grow in the life of grace and charity while receiving the church's help to this end. So someone who's living in an irregular situation may still be able to grow in the life of grace and charity while receiving the church's help to this end. Okay, I think we're all good to that point, right? We're see a few heads of people I'm seeing nodding. All right, we can live with that. Then there's a footnote, footnote number 351. In certain cases, this can include the help of the sacraments. Hence, I want to remind priests that the confessional must not be a torture chamber, but rather an encounter with the Lord's mercy. I would also point out that the Eucharist is not a prize for the perfect, but a powerful medicine and nourishment for the weak. So that's the contentious part of the whole document. That the Holy Father seems to be saying that those in an irregular situation may go to communion. So those who are divorced and remarried can go to communion. those who are living together can go to communion, so on and so on. He doesn't actually say that. He says, I want also point out that the Eucharist is not a prize for the perfect, but a powerful medicine and nourishment for the weak. When we're struggling, where should we go? We go to the Lord in sacrament of confession and the Eucharist. That's where we go to find help, isn't it? Those are our helps. The church's official teaching is that if you're in a regular situation, that you cannot receive the sacraments. And so, again, we have to apply this particular discernment that we've been talking about. Maybe someone is in outwardly an irregular situation, but is not guilty of that sin for the various reasons we've talked about. And would that make it then possible for them to go to communion? The Holy Father is saying that's something we need to discuss. That would need to be discussed on an individual basis with the particular person's pastor. But he's leaving the door open that that is a possibility. And that was the big contention. Is the Holy Father saying that someone who is divorced and remarried or living together can go to communion? He doesn't say they can, but he's also saying there needs to be a discussion and that we can't automatically say they can't either. There needs to be a discussion to determine what is the culpability. If someone is in serious sin, is culpable of serious sin, then you can't go to communion until you go to confession. That's the teaching of the church. If we are conscious of culpable sin, we have to go to confession first. Holy Father is asking a question, is it always the case that being in an irregular situation is a culpable sin? That's the question. We don't have a full answer, but he's using this law of gradualness from St. John Paul II to help us to look at it in a more pastoral way and to see if it's possible, that the sacraments can be that healing grace for others. Now, I'll pause. Is there a question? No? Wow, okay. All right. So we have 4 minutes. Mercy. The Holy Father again says mercy. We can't compromise the truth. And please remember that. We cannot compromise the truth. Right? And this book is not doing that. It's over and over and over again telling us the truth about what we believe about marriage and family life and sexuality. It's telling us the truth of what we believe. We cannot compromise the truth. But the truth must be applied with mercy. And the truth must be applied in a way that is helpful, in a way that draws people in, not pushes them away. The church, because we follow the gospel of Christ, invites people in, is not meant to push people away. Chapter 8 ends with, this offers us a framework and a setting which will help us avoid a cold bureaucratic morality in dealing with more sensitive issues. Instead, it sets us in the context of a pastoral discernment filled with merciful love, which is ever ready to understand, forgive, accompany hope, and above all, integrate. That's what we're called to. This is how we're called to put love into action in our lives. Chapter 9.
Bishop, sorry, there is one question that just came in. Is a relationship between two males or females in a regular situation?
That one's a little more difficult because it's never the sacrament of marriage. We talked about that last week. The Holy Father says that something that is a relationship that is not stable and open to life can never be defined as marriage. And so that's a different situation. And in here, again, if you read the whole thing, he talks about it several times, and the couples in same-sex situations need to speak with their priests about living as God calls them to live. So it is a little different, yes. It wouldn't be just an irregular situation. It's not, because it's not marriage. So it's not an irregular marriage. It's not marriage as we understand marriage. Chapter 9, again, I encourage you to read it. It's all about the spirituality of marriage and families. How do we as families, how do you as couples live out that spirituality of marriage? And I want to conclude because I only have 30 seconds left. I'm going to read you the last paragraph of the document. I'm going to read, it's a little long, I'm going to read the whole paragraph as a summary to today. The teaching of the Master and St. Paul on marriage is set, and not by chance, in the context of the ultimate and definitive dimension of our human existence. We urgently need to rediscover the richness of this teaching. By heeding it, married couples will come to see the deeper meaning of their journey through life. As this exhortation has often noted, no family drops down from heaven perfectly formed. Families need constantly to grow and mature in the ability to love. This is a never-ending vocation born of the full communion of the Trinity, the profound unity between Christ and his church, the loving community which is the Holy Family of Nazareth, and the pure fraternity existing among the saints of heaven. Our contemplation of the fulfillment which we have yet to attain also allows us to see in proper perspective the historical journey which we make as families, and in this way to stop demanding of our interpersonal relationships a perfection, a purity of intentions, and a consistency which we will only encounter in the kingdom to come. It also keeps us from judging harshly those who live in situations of frailty. All of us are called to keep striving towards something greater than ourselves, and our families and every family must feel this constant impulse. Let us make this journey as families. Let us keep walking together. What we have been promised is greater than we can imagine. May we never lose heart because of our limitations, or ever stop seeking that fullness of love and communion which God holds out before us. The end. No, not quite, because Teresa will do chapters 4 and 5.
I will, and we just have one little question that I think you can probably answer fairly quickly, or if not, they can send the question on to me and I can respond by email. What is a concrete example of an irregular situation that would diminish or lessen culpability?
A woman who is alone with, say, 3 children, her husband left her, that situation we gave, and she remarries someone civilly in order to help provide for the children, because she can't do it on her own enough. So she can't get married in the church because the husband is still alive and it was a valid marriage. She can't get an annulment, but she's afraid that she can't take care of her children. So that fear, that psychological compulsion to provide for her children, that could be a place that would reduce culpability.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's, again, these are complicated issues, which is why it's hard to put it out that would necessarily, but that would be one where discussion could occur with the pastor, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you. I want to thank Bishop Lobsinger for taking on the 2 tough pieces. I know that I am getting the easy pieces next week, 4 and 5. We wanted to end on a high note, so we put it at the end. But I think the material, both evenings, have given great depth and an understanding. And in many ways, I think it tells us how much there is for us to know about our teachings on marriage, sexuality, and the Pope is trying to get us to see this, as you ended that beautiful paragraph, as a lived experience, a daily lived experience. And I think you brought much of that into your talk. So thank you very much for that. And I do appreciate your taking those chapters on and giving me the nice ones. So everyone, we will once again be sending out, or I will send out next Tuesday, the link for Wednesday evening. We'll be looking at chapter 4 and 5. Those of you who may want to read the document, moment don't have a copy of an actual book of Amoris Laetitia, which if you want one, you can email and we can send you one out. We do charge, but they're not that expensive. But you can also download it for free. Go onto the website at vatican.va. And type in Amoris Laetitia, and it's a lot of pages. You can read it online. If you're printing it, I just want to warn you, it's a lot of pages, but you can get it that way for free, and you can read it right online, and you can download it to your computer, so you don't have to read it all at once just because you're downloading it. So thank you all for again attending this evening, for your interest in learning more. And next week we'll finish that off. And again, I encourage you to keep an eye out for the other speakers who are coming next month, Connie Clark on the wisdom of faith in the home. So that's it for this evening. Again, thank you, Bishop Lobsinger. Very much appreciate all that you've done. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all next week.
Night, everyone.
Bye-bye.